Look, I don't know where things started going wrong, but I know it wasn't overnight. If I'm being honest, it wasn't even some dramatic thing. No screaming matches or slamming doors. It just crept up like rust on a bike you forgot to put away. Emily, my wife of 7 years, was always sharp, confident, and on top of her game. She's a realtor, and not just any realtor. She was the realtor everyone wanted. You know the type. Dressed to kill, always with a damn latte in hand, rushing between showings, and charming her way through negotiations. I was proud of her. But somewhere along the way, something changed. She started cracking, little by little, and the thing is, I noticed. I just didn't say anything at first. It was late one morning when she left the house in that same crisp black blazer she loves, the one that hugs her waist just right. But instead of her usual bounce, she had this weight in her step. I watched her from the window as she threw her bag in the car, ran her hand through her hair, and stared out for a second like the world was caving in. She looked stressed, and for Emily, stress was unusual. That woman was always on top of shit, until she wasn't. When she came home that evening, I asked her how work was going. She gave me the same old line, "Everything's fine. Just a lot on my plate, you know?" Her voice sounded tight, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I didn't push because, marriages don't always work like that. Sometimes you learn to let things slide, trusting that your partner will come to you when they're ready. But the calls were the first red flag. She was glued to her phone. If it wasn't buzzing, she was scrolling through emails or texting someone. What really caught my attention wasn't the fact that she was getting calls. That's normal in her line of work. It was how every call seemed to end with her sounding more drained, more disappointed. I'd ask, "Everything okay? Work stuff?" She'd just smile and wave it off. Yeah, just some flaky clients. It's slow right now." At that point, I figured, all right, maybe it's a slow season. No big deal. But something gnawed at me. It didn't feel right, like there was more to the story that I wasn't getting. Then came that property presentation. She had mentioned it casually one night while scrolling through her phone, almost like it was no big deal, but I could tell it was important. "There's this big commercial listing coming up, babe. Could be a game changer if I land it." I tried to offer my support. "You need any help?" "I can." She cut me off with a quick smile. No, I got this." She always had this thing about being self-sufficient, which I respected, but I could see how hard she was pushing herself. That morning of the showing, she left the house looking every bit the successful realtor. Heels, designer bag, the works. But the stress in her eyes was still there, no matter how good she looked on the outside. That's when Thomas entered the picture. Now, I didn't know much about him at first, just that he was some businessman she met at the showing. She mentioned him briefly that night, and I could tell by the way she said his name that he'd made an impression. Thomas seemed really interested in the property, she said in this light, almost hopeful tone. Something about how she spoke about him felt off. It wasn't just professional, not the way she described him. I remember making some stupid joke like, "Well, let's hope this guy's wallet is as good as his interest, right?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I tried not to think much of it at the time, but from then on, something shifted in her. It was subtle, but I noticed. She wasn't as tired or frustrated after work. If anything, she seemed lighter, almost like a weight had been lifted. And every time she brought up Thomas in passing, because of course she brought him up more than once, there was this little spark in her voice, a spark that used to be reserved for me. That's when I started feeling uneasy. But you don't just accuse your wife of whatever I was thinking, right? That's not how it works. You tell yourself you're being paranoid, that it's nothing. And I wanted to believe that. I really did. Then one night, I stumbled on something. And when I say stumbled, I mean it. I wasn't even looking for it. She left her phone on the kitchen counter. And while I was grabbing a beer from the fridge, the screen lit up with a message. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to go through my wife's phone, but the preview caught my eye. It was from Thomas. "I love the way you made me feel today." I stared at that message like it was a loaded gun. I remember thinking, this has to be a mistake. Maybe it's just a weird way of talking about the property. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I unlocked her phone. Yeah, I knew her passcode. Don't judge me. What I found wasn't explicit, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. There were messages, personal ones. Things about how much she appreciated his company, how he made her days easier, how good it felt to have someone to talk to. She hadn't said anything about seeing him outside of work, But the tone of those messages? It was intimate. Way more than it should have been. I put the phone down like it burned my hand and sat at the kitchen table, staring into space. I didn't know what to think. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like, I told myself. Maybe they were just friends. But who was I kidding? Over the next few days, I tried to act normal, but it was eating me alive. Every time she smiled at her phone or mentioned Thomas, it felt like a punch to the gut. And here's the messed up part. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. I didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to face the possibility that my wife was slipping away from me. Instead, Emily started throwing herself into work even more. She was all over social media, updating her listings, attending every networking event she could find. She said she needed to change her strategy, but it felt like she was running from something or someone. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was excitement. Hell, I didn't know. All I knew was that things were changing, and not in a good way. And me? I just sat there, watching it all happen, telling myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew better. Something was coming. I just didn't know how bad it was going to get. The first time I noticed Emily's sudden success, I'll admit, it threw me off. I mean, out of nowhere, she went from struggling to sell a house to closing 3 deals in a week. It didn't make sense. A month ago, she was practically pulling her hair out, complaining about flaky clients. Now, she was on top of the world, selling luxury properties like they were candy bars. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, calls, emails, everything. Friends started making jokes like, "Hey, Emily, what's the secret? Got a magic wand or something?" She'd just laugh it off, all humble. But her eyes said something else, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. Everyone was proud of her, except me. Because here's the thing, success isn't random. Not in real estate, and not at the level she was suddenly playing at. My gut told me something was off, but every time I tried to shake the thought, it clung tighter. There's no way you go from struggling to this level of success in a blink unless something shady is going on. At first, I tried to ignore it. I threw myself into other things, hanging out with my friends, working out more, even picking up a few projects around the house, just to keep busy. But the harder I tried to distract myself, the more those nagging thoughts crept in. Every time her phone buzzed, my mind went straight to Thomas. I kept wondering if he was the secret to all this newfound success. One night, we went out to dinner with some friends. I was halfway through a beer, trying my best to stay in the moment, when I overheard a conversation at the other end of the table. One of Emily's colleagues was talking about her success. "She's absolutely killing it right now. It's like she came out of nowhere." Yeah, someone else chimed in. "She's got the connections now, though. Once you get in with the right people, everything falls into place." I froze. The words "the right people" hit me like a brick. I couldn't help but wonder who those people were, or who that person was. My mind immediately went to Thomas. I didn't say anything, but I could feel my stomach twist. This wasn't just dumb luck. She wasn't just hustling harder. There was something else going on, and I needed to find out what. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning things over in my head, replaying every interaction, every conversation, every time she mentioned Thomas. Something didn't add up, and it was driving me crazy. So, yeah, I did something I'm not proud of. I started following her. Not in a creepy way, okay? I just needed to know where she was going, what she was doing when she wasn't at home. It was the only way to stop my brain from spinning in circles. It didn't take long before I saw what I was afraid of. One afternoon, Emily told me she had a meeting with a high-profile client. She got all dressed up, way more than usual, even for her. She wore that red dress I used to love, the one she knew made her look stunning. I told myself it was just a work thing. I mean, she's a realtor. Dressing up is part of the job, right? But when I saw her walk out of the house and get into a sleek black BMW waiting by the curb, my heart sank. Thomas was in the driver's seat, grinning like he had just won the lottery. She slid into the passenger seat, and they drove off together. I sat there, frozen in place, watching them disappear down the street. I knew what I saw, but my brain didn't want to accept it. I told myself it could still be innocent. Maybe it was just a ride. Maybe they were going to meet a client together. Maybe. But deep down, I knew. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. When she got home, I confronted her. I waited until she kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of wine before I spoke. "Emily, I need to ask you something." She looked up from her glass, her eyes narrowing slightly. What's on your mind? What's going on with you and Thomas? I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. Her expression didn't change, at least not at first. She tilted her head, gave me that same tired smile she always used when she thought I was overreacting. Thomas? He's just a client, Mike. You know that. I shook my head. No, it's not just that. I saw the messages, Emily. I saw how you talked to him. Her smile vanished. Her face tightened, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something, panic maybe, or guilt. It was there, just for a second, before she masked it with anger. You went through my phone? She snapped, slamming her wine glass down on the table. Are you seriously spying on me now? Don't twist this around. I shot back. I saw the way you looked at him. I saw you leave with him today. Don't lie to me, Emily. She crossed her arms, her jaw clenched tight. I told you it's business. I don't know what kind of crazy ideas you've been cooking up in your head, but nothing is going on between us. Then why are you getting in his car? I demanded. Why do you talk to him like that in your messages? Because he's helping me with clients, she shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. God, Mike, can't you just trust me for once? Trust. She had the nerve to throw that word at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. I couldn't believe it. Trust? You're asking me to trust you when you're sneaking around with another man? I felt my blood boiling, my fists clenching at my sides. I'm not sneaking around, she yelled back. It's business, Mike. I'm doing this for us, for our future. I laughed bitterly. Our future? Is that what Thomas calls it? Her face twisted in anger. You're unbelievable. You've never supported me. Never. The second I start doing well, you come at me with this bullshit. It felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, trying to find any trace of the woman I married. But all I saw was someone I didn't recognize, someone cold, defensive, and distant. The conversation ended there, but the damage was done. From that moment on, things between us were never the same. She threw herself even deeper into her work, and I could feel her slipping further away every day. She stopped talking to me about anything real. It was like I didn't exist, like our marriage didn't matter anymore. And the worst part? I still didn't have solid proof. All I had were suspicions, a few messages, and the sinking feeling that the woman I loved was gone. I didn't know how to fix it, or if I even could. All I knew was that something had broken between us. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see a way to put it back together. I knew I couldn't sit back and let her keep lying to my face. Something inside me snapped after that last confrontation. I had spent years trusting Emily, believing we were in this life together, but it had become clear that whatever we once had was long gone. Now it was just me, a pile of doubts, and a gut feeling telling me she was doing things I couldn't forgive. I needed the truth, hard evidence, not just my suspicions. And if she thought she could gaslight me into believing I was the one in the wrong, she had another thing coming. The first step was subtle, talking to people. I didn't go in guns blazing. I knew better than that. Instead, I reached out to a few of her colleagues, playing it cool, asking casual questions about work. That's when the pieces started falling into place. A guy named Matt, one of her competitors, let it slip over drinks. We were at a bar after work, just bullshitting about life, when he dropped the bomb. Yeah, Emily's been staying out late a lot lately. Word around the office is she's pulling all-nighters with clients to seal the deal. Pretty committed, huh? He said it with a grin, but it hit me like a hammer to the chest. I kept my face straight, pretending it didn't bother me. Yeah, she's dedicated like that. I muttered, forcing a laugh. Inside, I was reeling. Staying the night with clients? That was a whole new level. My suspicions about Thomas were bad enough, but this was something else entirely. Over the next few weeks, I dug deeper. I started documenting everything. Text messages, emails, phone logs. I even went through our shared calendar, piecing together where she claimed she was versus where she actually went. And the more I found, the uglier the truth became. It wasn't just Thomas. No, Emily had cast a wide net. I found messages with multiple clients, all with the same flirtatious, intimate tone. There were photos too, selfies with different men in hotel lobbies, smiling like they were on vacation instead of business meetings. I started seeing a pattern. Certain properties, certain clients, and certain nights when she never came home. She even gave them nicknames, favorites, she called them. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying that hard to hide it. It was like she didn't care if I found out. The breaking point came at a party I almost skipped. One of my buddies from work, Josh, invited me last minute. Come on, man. Get out of the house. You've been stressing too much. A couple of drinks will do you good. I wasn't in the mood, but something told me I needed to go. Maybe it was just a gut feeling, or maybe I was hoping for a distraction. Either way, I showed up. That's when I heard it. Emily's voice. She was standing with a small group of colleagues, wine in hand, laughing louder than I'd heard her laugh in months. I stayed in the background, close enough to hear, but far enough that she wouldn't notice me. And then she said it. You know, it's not about the listings. It's about knowing how to read people, she boasted, swirling her wine. Some showings I just know will end well. You learn to find the right favorites. The group laughed like they were all in on some inside joke. I stood there, frozen, listening to my wife casually brag about the very thing I'd been losing sleep over. My chest burned with rage, but I kept my cool. I couldn't blow up there. Not yet. Not until I had everything in place. That night, I gathered every shred of evidence I had. The photos, the messages, the timeline. I made copies of everything, emails, texts, even her call history with Thomas. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. Not this time. The confrontation came the next morning. I waited for her to come home, knowing she'd just spent the night closing a deal. When she walked through the door, wearing the same dress from the night before and smelling like someone else's cologne, I knew it was time. We need to talk, I said, blocking her path to the bedroom. She rolled her eyes, clearly exhausted. Mike, I've had a long night. Can we not do this right now? No, we're doing this now. I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. Her eyes flickered with recognition the second she saw the photos. I held up the messages too, scrolling through the ones with Thomas, the hotel selfies, the late-night calls. What the hell is this, Emily? I demanded. She stared at me, her face hardening. And just like that, the switch flipped. Instead of guilt, she went straight to anger. You went through my phone again? She snapped, slamming her wine glass down on the table. Jesus, Mike. Do you even hear yourself? You're obsessed. Don't turn this on me, I said, my voice low but firm. You lied. You cheated. And you've been sneaking around with multiple clients. Don't act like I'm the bad guy here. I was doing it for us, she screamed. Everything I've done was for our future. You've never supported me, Mike. Not once. It was the same song and dance, blaming me, turning it all around like I was the villain. But this time, I wasn't falling for it. You mean sleeping with other men was for our future? I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Wow, Emily, you're a real saint. She glared at me, fists clenched, but she had no more lies left. The truth was out, and there was no going back. That's when I knew I had to take things further. Exposing her in front of me wasn't enough. She needed to be exposed in front of everyone. All those colleagues who laughed along with her, all those friends who thought she was this perfect, hardworking professional. They needed to know the truth. I started putting together a plan. I copied the photos, the messages, and every piece of evidence onto a USB drive. I was going to expose her at the next big party, where everyone she worked with would be gathered. If she thought she could humiliate me and get away with it, she was dead wrong. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about taking back control. She had taken my trust, my marriage, and thrown it away for cheap thrills. Now it was my turn to show the world who she really was. The opportunity came quicker than I expected. Another invite arrived, a big office party where all her colleagues would be. This was my chance. I loaded the USB into my pocket, ready to drop the bomb. The evening felt electric. I could feel the tension building in my chest, my heart racing as I imagined the moment I'd reveal everything. I knew it would be messy. I knew it would hurt, but it had to be done. This was going to be the night Emily would never forget. The night of the party arrived, and I walked through the doors like a man on a mission. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't backing down. This was it, the moment I would expose Emily for who she really was. All of her colleagues were there, gathered in their little groups, laughing and chatting over drinks, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I spotted her near the bar, talking with a few co-workers, wearing that same fake smile she'd mastered over the years. She didn't see me right away, which was fine. I wasn't there to play nice. I took a deep breath, reached into my jacket pocket, and pulled out the USB with all the evidence. I tapped a guy I recognized from her office, the one running the event, and told him I had a presentation to share. He gave me a weird look but shrugged, figuring I was just another corporate husband trying to show off. I walked up to the front of the room and cleared my throat. Hey, everyone, sorry to interrupt, but I think there's something you all need to see. The room fell silent as I plugged in the USB and loaded the photos and messages onto the projector. At first, people seemed confused. Maybe they thought it was some kind of joke. But as the pictures rolled, showing Emily cozying up with clients and swapping flirtatious messages, the room shifted. Conversations died out. Eyes widened. Gasps echoed through the room. And then I heard it, the sharp intake of breath from Emily. "What the hell is this?" she hissed, storming up to the front, her face pale. I kept my voice steady. "This is the truth, Emily. The truth about your new business methods." She looked around at the stunned faces of her colleagues, then back at the screen, where one of her selfies with Thomas, taken in a hotel lobby, glowed larger than life. Her jaw tightened, and I could see the panic setting in. But instead of admitting anything, she did what she always did, turned it on me. "This is bullshit," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You're spreading lies? None of this is what it looks like." I crossed my arms, unfazed. "Really? So those texts about your favorites were just innocent work banter? And those hotel photos? All part of closing a deal, right?" She glared at me, then looked around, desperate for someone to back her up. But nobody moved. Her colleagues stared at her with wide eyes, whispering among themselves, piecing together the puzzle. "You don't get it," she stammered. "He's just trying to humiliate me." "Funny," I shot back. "I thought you were doing a pretty good job of that yourself." She tried to regain control, but the damage was done. The whispers turned into murmurs, and the looks her co-workers gave her were a mix of disgust and disbelief. Emily, the woman who had spent years building a reputation as the top realtor in the business, stood there, exposed for the liar and cheat she was. I didn't wait around for the fallout. I had done what I came to do. I unplugged the USB, slipped it back into my pocket, and walked out, leaving her to deal with the mess she created. Outside, the night air felt cool against my skin, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of everything, her lies, the betrayal, the endless suspicion, was gone. It was over. That's when I heard someone call my name. "Mike!" I turned and saw Katie, one of Emily's colleagues, walking toward me. She had this curious smile, like she had been waiting for this moment. Katie had always been friendly, too friendly maybe, but I never thought much of it. Until now. "Quite a show in there," she said, her voice low and smooth. "Had to be done," I replied, still trying to process everything. She stepped closer, her eyes holding mine a little too long. I always knew something was off about her. "But you deserve better." There was something in the way she said it, soft, but with a hint of suggestion. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. And then, out of nowhere, she smiled and said, "How about we grab a drink? You could probably use one." I hesitated, but only for a second. Yeah, I could." We ended up at a quiet bar a few blocks away, just the two of us. I thought it was going to be an awkward conversation, some weird post-scandal therapy session. But it wasn't. Katie was easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could actually relax. We talked about everything, the fallout with Emily, the mess she left behind, even some personal stuff about Katie's own experiences in the industry. By the end of the night, it was clear there was something between us. Not just sympathy or comfort, but real chemistry. When she suggested we do dinner sometime, I didn't hesitate. I wanted to see where this could go. That first dinner with Katie was the beginning of something new. We talked about things I hadn't discussed in years. Dreams, regrets, even stupid little stuff like favorite movies and songs. For once, I wasn't just Emily's husband or the guy caught up in a scandal. I was me, and Katie liked that guy. Life didn't magically fix itself overnight, but things started to settle. I spent more time with Katie and less time obsessing over Emily and the mess she made. We found common interests, weekend hikes, bad movies, even cooking together, though she was way better at it than me. It felt good, normal even. Meanwhile, Emily's life was falling apart. I heard through the grapevine that her reputation was in shambles. Clients dropped her. Colleagues avoided her. She tried to spin the story, but nobody was buying it. The scandal had stuck, and there was no undoing it. What really got under her skin, though, was seeing me move on. I wasn't supposed to bounce back, not after everything she did. But there I was, happier than I'd been in years, spending time with someone who actually cared about me. She tried to call me a few times, leaving these desperate voicemails about how we could work things out and move past this. I never called her back. There was nothing left to say. The last time I saw her was at a coffee shop by accident. She looked tired, worn